Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Empowering Partners for Improved Care Epic podcast. I'm thrilled to have you join us for our fifth episode. Together, we will delve deep into the stories of patients, family members, and facility staff, each offering invaluable insights and experiences. From covering obstacles to embracing proven practices, our guests share the transformative moments that have reshaped their lives, interventions, and outcomes. Get ready to be inspired as we explore the power of partnership in fostering better care. I am Jesse Cubillo, your host and patient engagement specialist for ESRD Network 3. Today, we have the honor of welcoming two remarkable guests, Robert Silvera and Joyce Solomon. Welcome.
Hi, good
Hi, Jesse.
morning.
How are
Hey.
you?
We're going to learn about your journeys with home dialysis and uncover the successes and challenges that you both have faced along the way. But thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So before we jump into this like the topic about your journeys and everything, I do have to say, Joyce, I've known you for like over 10 years now that I've been at the network. And you were a Patient Family Advisory Council member of ours, a PFAC member. So you've been very active at the network level with our patient group and also our medical review board. You're a member of our MRB. So thank you for all those years that you've worked with the network, and we've seen your journey as it developed as well throughout those years. But thank you, I appreciate that. And Robert, you are one of our most acquired or required, not required. What's the word I'm looking for? Our most wanted, I want to say, patient mentors in our patient-to-patient mentoring program. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and the work that you're doing. And I know I see a lot of potential for you in the future with us here at the network, Robert. So stay tuned for that. All right. So I know the two of you have very unique stories, and the idea is the work that we're doing, and you've heard me talk about in the past that the work that we're doing as a network goes back to promoting home dialysis, promoting transplant, and educating patients and providing resources to patients. But I think one of the things that something that speaks deep and close to home to patients is, like, if they hear from another patient's story, if they hear that journey that they've gone through. And so the reason we're here today is I want to be able to give you an opportunity to share your own unique stories. And let's talk about what was it that you've gone through and where you're at today. And maybe that can also inspire other patients, and they can see that the obstacles that they are facing currently are similar obstacles that you probably went through and overcame. And there are some success stories to that. So let's start with a little bit about, tell us about yourself and your personal journey and what led you to pursue home dialysis as a treatment option. And Robert, go ahead. We'll start with you.
All right. Thanks again for having me. So about 5, 6 years, 7 years ago, I'm seeing my doctor, knew the kidneys were failing, but he told me you need to start dialysis in a few months. So I researched, went to the National Kidney Foundation. I watched all the videos that I ended up seeing when I was at the dialysis center I was starting. And I chose from the beginning to start with PD. I didn't want to do hemodialysis unless I really had to. So I made that decision, showed the videos to my wife when we went to the clinic, because the spouse or the partner always comes in, and watched the videos. I knew what to expect. So I thought, but the amount of space for materials. And that lasted for about a year and almost 2 years, and maybe a year and 8 months, year and 9 months. And everything was going well. I was still working full time as a school principal. I was doing dialysis in my office once during the day, and then in the afternoon I would come home, and then evening on the cycler, etc. I was able to go, to weddings and, things like that, bring my materials with me. And then I ended up getting an infection, unfortunately. And they stopped, removed the catheter, let it, heal for a while. Then I had a perm cath in my chest. Unfortunately, leads directly to the heart, as you know. So it's a little dicey, but that was the easiest dialysis, because there's no pain, there's nothing, but it's just in danger of getting infected. And they moved the catheter from one side to the other, and then that didn't work, moved it back again. We waited. Each time you have to wait, 2 to 4 weeks before you can even try to use it. And by the last time, it was January of 2020, and the last move wasn't quite working. So then COVID hit, and I just couldn't take a chance of being hospitalized. So I said, let's just go with hemodialysis. And then that journey began, because that, takes a little bit more out of you. But my mother had been on dialysis years before, and she would complain not complain, but she'd be exhausted. And I walked out of my first hemodialysis, with my fistula, saying, I don't know, that wasn't so bad. I can do this. And I continued to work and do my dialysis 4th shift. And I found a clinic close by that did 4th shift, do it after school. And, but then COVID hit, I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't take a chance. So then I retired. But then I started doing dialysis during the day, my chemo, and then I was exhausted afterwards. I recently found out, it's called dialysis fatigue syndrome. I definitely sitting for 12, 14, 16 hours, nauseous, just couldn't do anything. And then on my off days, I felt okay. I would be, out in my car. So during COVID, I never felt like I was stuck at home, because I was going out 3 days a week and then sitting home. And then on my off days, I was out driving my car, because I was not going to just sit around doing nothing. So a lot of people suffered that, you're stuck in your home, but I was able to. And then after that, and that total dialysis time was 5 years, 5 years and 10 days. And I was active on the list for only about half of that 5 years, about 2.5 years, because I also had triple bypass surgery while on dialysis in the hospital. I was on PD at that point for a year, and I asked them if I could do my own dialysis while I was in the hospital. And they had somebody watch me, so I was able to do my own PD in my hospital room. And actually, some of the cardiac nurses came to watch, because they don't have an opportunity to see PD very often. So I held my little classes there a couple times. And then, it was good. Everything went well, but then everything happened. And then 5 years and 10 days later, they called me and said, we've got a kidney. I had a couple calls just leading up to the 5 year. And then finally I had one that was a match, and it was, it was the golden kidney, I think my doctor said, because it was a very young person, healthy, no drugs, the whole bit. So, and I had been willing, I'd signed the consent for a hepatitis, Hep C. I would have taken one of those. They talked to me about that. I said, I'll take whatever you can give me. But this was a good kidney. And, now my kidney's working amazingly well. Never an issue from the first day. No. And there's a lot in between. I mean, I developed pericarditis while on PD, which I didn't realize was a possible side effect until I was in the hospital. But, the fix for that is very simple. Take your ibuprofen and the swelling goes down. But you don't know that, because we don't take ibuprofen. Well, you're, kidney disease. You just don't do that. So it all worked out. And you learn a lot. I asked a lot of questions. The first time on hemodialysis, I asked the nurse in the hospital or the technician about all the buttons and the numbers on the machine. And she proceeded for 40 minutes to explain everything on there. So I just, I like to ask questions and get information.
Yeah.
And that's, now I'm good.
Yeah, you've gone basically through the different modalities. You did a PD, you did in-center, and now you're transplanted. So you do have kind of like the spectrum of knowledge on the modalities.
And it was great to actually meet Joy. I sat next to Joy at our last conference, the only conference I've been to, which was wonderful. And when she said she does home hemo, first thing I said, she sat down, I said, I have some questions for you. And my first question, because I was willing to try home hemo. Okay. But then, giving the needle I can deal with, I was just worried about taking that needle out and trying to put pressure right away. Yeah. And then Joy explained, and the doctor next to you explained how that works. And I said, oh, it's just as well, though. My wife would not have been happy watching that. Not that she would watch it, but she just wouldn't even be able to handle that. So thank you. So Joy, how about you tell us about your journey? Robert did in-center, he did PD, and now he's transplanted. How about your experiences? What tell us about it?
Sure. So to begin with, I'd like to give a little history of how I was diagnosed. I was a young adult, and every time I have my urinalysis tested, there is tremendous amount of protein. Subsequently, I was referred by my internal medicine physician to a nephrologist, and I was monitored. And the conclusion was that I have IgA nephropathy. It's common to Asians where your glomerular membrane typically pass urine and eventually it causes damage. Once the damage sets in, hypertension sets in, and I have uncontrollable blood pressures. I was maintained on medications, diet, and exercise until I got married and I got pregnant. That pregnancy put a lot of pressure on my kidneys. And since I delivered my baby, my creatinine subsequently increases every year. Fast forward in 2016, I had a lot of symptoms that the basic etiology or cause is because of my failing kidney. So my nephrologist mentioned to me that while I still urinate and I have a little bit of remaining kidney function, it is in my best interest to be placed on dialysis way ahead before comparing to those patients that typically they describe it as a crashing patient. So the word dialysis is something that resonates with me well because while I was a nurse, in one of my career highlights, I work at a hospital that has the third largest population of kidney transplants. And in that, I took care of children until 18 years old who have chronic kidney disease, who are on home dialysis, who basically have acute illness that requires the acute therapy for the acute therapy form of dialysis when they are in ICU. And because the medical center has a lot of kidney transplant, I learned and I became a specialist in immediate transplant care and post-transplant care. So that experience over 6 years, I became a specialist in kidney nursing care from home, acute to post-transplants. Little did I know that 25 years later, I moved on to different careers as a manager, director, performance improvement specialist, regulatory analyst, and as a instructor of nursing in state universities, that I have to use those skills, that knowledge and skills that I learned from that 6 years of nursing. So my nephrologist told me it's in my best interest to be placed on dialysis, to start dialysis. And that news came to me like a shock. My words stopped. I was in the middle of pursuing my doctorate in nursing. And so many changes happened with that decision. But the goal is for me to be healthy. So I agreed. And initially, I had a subclavian catheter. And I also have an AV fistula placed. And the subclavian catheter was my access for dialysis until the AV fistula matured. The first 6 months of my treatment was at the in-center, and I had to quit my job because I suffered from what we now know as post-dialysis fatigue syndrome. Every after treatment, I feel drained, fatigued. I could barely get up. And once I recover a little bit, here comes another treatment. So for 6 months, I could not work. I was very thin. My laboratory results were wacky until one nurse noticed that I am very proactive with my own treatment. Often, I already wash my hands, wash my area for access. I mention what my lab is. I record what I eat. And then a per diem nurse told me I would be the best patient to try home hemo or home dialysis, either PD or hemo. I was shocked to hear that because as a nurse, I was unaware of some of the advancement now on the outpatient side. And so I began to research, and I felt that it's something that I can do. So because of that desire, I was transferred to a clinic that offers home dialysis. I opted for home hemo because I like to be in a bubble bath, swim, and all that. And also, I was very conscious of how I would appear. That, sometimes I wear clothes that are fitting in my belly. And during summer, I like to wear two-piece. I'm petite, but my body is described as proportional. And I'm aware of some patients with like peripherally inserted central catheter for either chemotherapy or something, and they put something that's very artistic, and then they look good. So for that for at that time, it's primarily for aesthetic purposes. So I preferred home hemo, and then eventually I began to learn that there is a methodology called buttonhole, which I was introduced. So after that, I never felt pain because I accessed in the same area at the same time. So since 2016, I had been on home hemodialysis, and I will be excited to share my journey, why I appear like this. I still maintain full-time job, and my life goes on. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Joyce, for sharing that. And you highlighted, I think, important points that a lot of the patients think about when they talk about dialysis, home dialysis, and the options between PD and the option between hemodialysis. There are patients who are afraid of needles, and that's
Mhm.
Robert. That's what you were saying, right? That's something that you didn't consider that initially because it's something that you didn't think you'll be able to
Right.
do yourself, and your spouse would not have been able to kind of the side of it is something that you wouldn't have been able to do. So you went with the PD option as well.
Well,
Go ahead.
personally, I don't have a fear of the needles. I know though, putting a needle in wouldn't be a problem. I'm
Okay.
just concerned because when I watched them do hemo, first time you pull the needle out and you got to put pressure. I wasn't understanding. Nobody explained because I had already done PD, so I was on hemo for not even as long as Joyce, but it was a thought. But then everything else happened. I wasn't going to change to home hemo anytime soon at all because it was just not going to work. Plus, I retired, after 37 years of being in education. I didn't need to work anymore and that kind of thing. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's always a thought in the back of my head. So,
yeah.
but I've spoken with patients who don't like needles, when during my mentoring processes, phone calls. And it just, and even now, if I get like a shot or something, they're like, oh, I'm sorry about that. I said, this is nothing compared to hemodialysis.
Mhm.
But talking about like Joyce, she's able to do home hemodialysis and sustain her job, maintain her job, and the work that she's doing, and a full-time job at that too, right, Joyce?
Mhm.
Right. And Robert, you were sharing with me previous to this podcast how you were a school principal and you were able to do your treatments while you were at the school. Do you want to share a little bit about that experience?
Yes, when I was first placed on dialysis, I lived close enough to the school that I had to do one exchange during the day because I had done the cycler overnight. I had to do one, somewhere around between 11 and 1. And then the next one didn't have to happen until 4:30 o'clock. So I was home by then. My first probably 2 weeks of having to do this every day, I was running home during my lunch period because as a principal, you don't really get a lunch period. You're supposed to be there, but I had to do it. But and that was my plan for 2 or 3 weeks, but it lasted about a week. And instead, I just closed my door. And when you're on PD, nobody can be in the room. It's got to be clean, clear of people just for the actual connection. Once you make the connection onto your catheter, then anybody can be in the room. And I was able to hold meetings. And again, it was an elementary school. I'd have meetings with teachers and parents, but also some students. And sometimes they don't even notice because I just hang it on, my bookcase behind me. And some kid will say, oh, what's that there? I said, well, Mr. Silvera is sick. And we just move on. And nobody ever had any issue. Parents were always interested because, again, a lot of people keep these things, they're private,
Yeah.
However, I needed to tell everybody because people had to know why I wasn't going to be there on days, or why, some parents are very like, why isn't Mr. Silvera there one day a week or that kind of thing. But nobody ever had a problem with it,
Yeah, but
and I was able to do it. and then go home and do what I had to later. So
Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
also important because you were not only doing your own treatment and taking care of yourself, but you were conscious of the fact that you wanted to also bring awareness to the general
yes, oh
population
yes,
of not just what dialysis is, but that I did have a patient from another network who said dialysis means life, like it's not the
yes,
end of it all, right? And so to you,
exactly.
you were kind
It,
of like that you were showing them that, hey, this treatment that I'm receiving, it's what's giving me life. It's basically that treatment that allows me to be here and continue to do my job, continue to interact with you. And there are people out there who don't know what dialysis is, or kidney failure for the from as a matter of
right.
fact, what leads to kidney failure. And so being able to convey and share your personal story as you're living it, I think that was something to admire. So yeah.
I was able to, I mean, I went to an education conference with all the administrators from my district at a restaurant, and it was going to be all day. And I just asked them, I went ahead, called ahead, said, I'm going to need a small room for 30, 45 minutes by
Mhm.
myself. And it was lunchtime, and I took the first 30 minutes of lunch and did what I had to do, and then put the stuff in my car, and I went and so there's always a way to go about it. You can live your life. I traveled not far, but I mean, hotels, you can do it easily at a hotel and things like that. And
Yeah.
even if you travel, by plane, you have the best thing is the material delivered to your hotel.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
you can't beat. You can go on cruises, all those kind of things. So it doesn't stop you from doing that. And even on hemodialysis, I've traveled there also, and all you need to do is have your clinic make an appointment somewhere else.
Mhm.
I was 400 or 500 miles away, and I've got an appointment there, and I did it twice there.
Mhm.
It's doable. It really is.
Yeah. Joyce, in being that you're doing home hemodialysis and you also had the experience of in-center for some
Mhm.
time, how would you say the two, comparing the two, how does it impact your quality of life, or has it impacted your quality of life? And do you see an overall difference in the two, having the two experiences in the modalities?
Oh yes, major difference. When I was in the end center, basically I am dependent on the availability of schedule. So if my schedule is 3 o'clock, I have to be there
Mhm.
because the chair is open for me.
Yeah.
However, if the last patient has experienced something like uh, symptoms of hemodynamic instability of low blood pressure, and they have to watch that patient, I have to wait. So time is an essence that there is a fixed time for me to wait for the chair. So as a domino effect, it affected my social life. That I cannot change the schedule because there is a fixed time dedicated for me, but
Mhm.
I cannot maneuver it by saying I would prefer a different time because the in-center dialysis has its own unique schedule.
Yeah, of course.
The other is the effect of the big machine. The big machine pulls out a lot of blood from me, and I'm petite. So consequently, eventually, as I mentioned earlier, I suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was exhausted, sleepy. I lost a lot of weight. I could not work. And then on top of that, the travel time. Whether the
Travel, yeah.
season, yes, whether the season is rainy, snowy, storm, and all that. If you don't go, then it has effects on your body if you don't have a treatment. And then the other is the fixed 3 times a week. You either are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And in between that, sometimes, you go to I call it parties or gatherings where you eat a lot and things like that. You have to wait for the next day because your schedule is fixed. Whereas in the in-center, those are the negative effects of in-center to me. Um, while the home hemo, basically, I manage my own time.
Mhm.
I manage my own treatment, and I can schedule my treatment depending on how I feel and what is on my calendar for the next day. Overall, the home treatment allowed me to be flexible with my treatment. As I mentioned, maintain a schedule basically based on my work schedule. As mentioned by Robert, I was also able to travel. Travel within the United States basically is very easy. There's a lot of centers that are affiliated with my center. So with that, either my social worker arranged a treatment for me near the area that I'm vacationing. And in 3 occasions, I took my machine with me in a car and some supplies because it's just within the driving range. We live in New Jersey, and then the vacation area is just in the Carolinas and in the Florida. Overall, there's a lot of positive effect on home hemodialysis for me. My blood pressures remains good. There's a lot of research that the in-center treatment with a big machine typically results in negative fluctuations of blood pressure. Blood pressure affects the heart, affects the brain, affects other organs, whereas the home hemodialysis machine is so small, it's gentle for my body. My blood pressure are very steady, and it had protected my brain because while I am on hemodialysis at home, when I sit in my chair, I became very productive. Connected with friends and family, I took online courses, reviewed some of the curriculum that I have to teach the next day, and I am more productive when sitting in a chair than when I'm not, which is the reverse. In conclusion, I am one that the literature have describes who have experienced positive effects of home hemodialysis.
That's great to hear.
My appetite improved, my labs are more manageable, and as I've said, if I have a plan for the next day, I can do treatment ahead, which I was able to maintain my social life. Now, I wanted to share a part of my life that had happened. It may not be experienced by others, but just in case it happens to you. When I was first diagnosed, my husband was very supportive. He was my care partner. And as they mentioned, sometimes a chronic illness can bind the family or it can also destroy a family. It appears that my husband suffered from the effects of chronic illness, and eventually we separated. But when we separated, that was not the end. I realized then that there is what you call a solo treatment. So if you're a dependable patient, your nephrologist can prescribe a solo treatment, which I am doing now. So you don't have to have a care partner. You can manage your own health. You can do your own home dialysis. And in the recent conference that I was with Robert, we met a physician in Jersey City, New Jersey, who has a lot of patients doing home dialysis solo without a partner. And she actually advocates that if you are able, you don't necessarily to have a care partner because sometimes there's that care partner burden. There's a lot of ways on how someone with end-stage renal disease can maintain life, just like Robert and I.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that personal component of your journey, and how it impacts family and the caregivers and your partners as well. I think one of the things that two of you highlighted in your story is that home dialysis, whether it be PD, peritoneal dialysis, or home hemodialysis, the both of them allowed you guys to be able to continue your life, as you guys mentioned, continuing to work, continuing to socialize, continuing to be there with the people that you wanted to connect with, and he allowed you that opportunity. I think one of the things that often we hear from patients are some of the misconceptions of what goes along with home dialysis. Oh, I don't have enough room in my house to store the equipment or the fluids or everything that goes along with the home dialysis component. So Robert, being you, I think you probably have the most, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joy, you probably had the most equipment and stuff and products in your home because you did PD, right? Can you share maybe like some of the
Right.
so your experience with that, the logistics that
Right.
go behind that as well, and then we'll hear from Joy as well in regards to some of the
So when I
logistics that go behind that.
when I started dialysis, I started PD just before Christmas of 2017, and I knew about the equipment. The equipment is delivered, and we're in Northern Jersey, Northern Jersey, Essex County. The equipment is delivered. I don't know if it still is. Was from over in New York State, but they only delivered once a month, so you have to get enough supplies. And walked in the back door, gentleman. He said, "Where do you want it?" I said, "Well, can't fit in the room, so let's put it all right by my back door, off to the side." And we put Christmas table covers over it, and that was part of our Christmas decoration. We piled all the Christmas presents on top, and that's the way I managed. And for the year and a half, that's where the material stayed. They do a home visit. The nurse, once you're trained, comes look at your spot up in the room where you're going to do it, everything. And I understand now they do deliver twice a month, which would be, less. I mean, dozens and dozens of boxes. We managed. When I started, again, as I told you, I researched. I did not want, as you were saying, that caretaker burden. I didn't want. Now, it did affect my family at the time. It was my son and my wife living at home here, and they still are. But they affected them in. They had to help me. Like I couldn't carry the boxes up the stairs anymore because I was, just weak from not even from dialysis, just from my, years of getting worse. And then emptying the fluid at the end of the day, which was whenever it happened from the machine, and things like that. I needed help with that, carrying, because there's a lot of garbage, a lot of plastic, from the material, which is all right in the garbage. I really think our garbage men knew what was going on because they saw all that, and they were very good about it. And the recycling of boxes and things. I mean, that's where my family helped. But in the actual process of the dialysis, never needed help. I tried not to, bother anybody about, I need this, I need that. But again, the first time I was doing dialysis on my cycler at night, and we're talking 3 weeks, 4 weeks into it, and the cap end broke off, and I was leaking fluid, and I'm in a panic, and my wife, I'm yelling at her, get out of the room, and the nurses are so good because you've got to call a number, they'll answer immediately. They help you with everything. They're like, just don't worry about it, just clamp it off, come to the clinic in the morning, and they just replaced it. So once you learn all these things the first time, you realize that it's doable. Everything's doable. The first 3 months, it was like panic of everything. But then after a while, you really start living the life that you said, well, here's what I want to do. I'm going to go there, and a lot of people asked at the beginning, because again, personally, my mother had been on dialysis, but, she was older and sicker. So she just went to the hospital. I didn't ask details. I did see her once, but, in the clinic, but otherwise I've never had a chance to discuss with people and ask them questions about it. And again, I ask a lot of questions at the clinic, whether it's hemodialysis or PD or, all those questions. I ask everything because I need to know, and I need to, like you said, educate people. I want people to know what's going on and how many people are at the clinic, and, what's happening when this is happening. I was doing my hemodialysis 4th shift. So as Joy was saying, you have your chair and that's your time. Fortunately, and they don't have the 4th shift anymore, you go in and they'll call me and say, Mr. Silvera, can you come in an hour early? And you walk in, you don't have the same chair. They say, okay, you're at 18, you're at 4, you're at 6, because there's very few people, and they just, as soon as there's an empty chair, they put you in. So it wasn't until I retired and was doing that regular 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning session, then you realize you have the same chair, and which technicians are there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Saturday, or overlapping, and you become. And I was thinking as Joy was speaking that I almost wouldn't want to do home hemo, especially because I wasn't working anymore. But to me, that is a social aspect. I go there to talk to people, and if I had to do it at home, I would have missed, all those people, their lives, people having babies. I was one of the technicians. She started there about a month after I did. She trained. I said, go ahead, stick me with the needles, practice on me, whatever. And now, 4 years later, she and another technician are engaged. They're getting married. And I just hear all those things and sort of become friends with the social worker and the dietitian and, all these people you just,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's, I don't know if I would have done so well home, but
Yeah,
you
well,
never,
you're at a different
Mm,
stage in your life too. As you said, you're
right.
retired,
right,
and now your
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
social circle is actually getting smaller now that
Oh,
I
yes.
found I was reading an article about when people retire, their social
Mm-hmm.
circle is the colleagues they have at work. That's the immediate people that you kind of speak to, socialize more. But once you retire, you remove yourself from that environment. Now that social circle becomes a lot smaller. You don't have those connections anymore, and it's harder to maintain when you're not working together. It's harder to maintain those relationships. And so you saw then going in center the family that you created in there with the friends that you created in there, those partnerships that you developed with the staff, with the patients, that helped you kind of replace that social circle that you had previously, and it
Mm-hmm.
Part of
gave you
my
that,
social, yeah,
yeah.
part of my
Right.
social circle as a teacher is still maintaining. I have friends that have been, I mean, there's a bunch of retirees and we hang out, but this smaller number. Whereas
Right.
when you're a principal, I was a principal in a different school. I didn't maintain friendships with them because I was the boss and they didn't know me
Mhm.
as Robert. They knew me as Mr. Silvera, the
Mr.
principal.
Ver-
There's one person
Mm-hmm.
I'm friends with because we were friends before I became principal. But the
Mm-hmm.
people from my teaching career, the 34, 33 years before that, those are people I still see and I, meet and we go walking and all that kind of stuff. But it's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different feel to it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
feeling
that's
the best feeling is that, now, all these years, I don't really have to work anymore, which is really nice because for all those years I was working, as many of us, 2 and 3 jobs, especially as a
yeah.
35 years ago, it wasn't, you had to have another job.
Yeah, now that you're not in center anymore, that component of being a mentor, and
Yes,
you still partner with your
yes,
dialysis center to be a mentor and coach and provide support to other patients, that has given you that social outlet, if you will,
yes,
of being
exactly.
able to continue to connect. And that's why you're so great, because you like talking to people. So
Do I ever?
yeah, but like the one thing you guys also mentioned is the traveling, and Joy, you mentioned you were talking about traveling with your supplies, your machine. We
Mm-hmm.
heard Robert shared some of the logistics that go behind having the equipment, the deliveries done to the house. How does that look for you? Your environment at home, your setup. How much space does that take?
Um, on basically up until 2021, from the time I was diagnosed until 2021, I was living in a home with enough space. So my supplies were delivered once a month. And then that personal event happened, and we have to sell our house, and I have to move to a rental temporarily while my townhome is being built. That was the time when I was able to speak with my nurse, my dialysis clinic nurse, which I visit once a month, that and the social worker, that I found out that it was possible to actually divide the deliveries. So from once a month, it became basically uh, delivery every 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So it's a lot less. As far as the isolation that Robert had mentioned, it is true. I had found out that majority of the, for lack of better word, more older patients look at the visit at the in-center as a social gathering. I was at a different stage of my life uh, where my career and profession basically is at its peak. And so I saw it differently.
Mhm.
That when I go to in-center, I apologize for this wording. I did not enjoy the fact that the people there have the same condition like me.
Mm.
I thrive more in an environment where people are healthy. So the transition to home treatment was best for me. I connected through, using technology with friends closer to home or away from home. I was able to maintain phone calls. I was able to basically obtain uh, advanced education certificates, things like that. So I was at a different stage of my life, but the social connection or isolation does not change when you go to home dialysis. It's just a matter of what technology you want to use, either phone call or FaceTime or things like that. But that is an opportunity, I believe, that if there is a social support for in-center, there needs to be a social support for home dialysis patients, because not everyone is at the stage of their life like me. So others who are doing home therapy are typically post-retirement and or may not have a lot of social support close to them. So we mentioned about the supplies, the isolation.
Do you
The
find, Joy, if you don't mind, do you find that you mentioned that you being in the dialysis center made you feel a certain way, and
Yeah.
so that could also be, do you think it was part of the fact that it was a constant reminder to you that you
You have an
wanted
illness.
to, you had that exactly, and you wanted to achieve other stuff, like you felt like something was taken away from you and you wanted to
Yes.
continue your career, your education, and so to you that was kind of like, I'm like almost like giving up. It's not that it was that you don't like the people, it was more of the fact that it
It's a
was a
reminder.
reminder
Yes.
to you, right? That it was that you felt like maybe I'm not going to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And so being that you transitioned to home hemodialysis, that gave you that opportunity to then break out of that shell and break and say, I'm able to then continue with those dreams that I had, those goals that I had of being able to go back to school, continue my work. And then that reminder of now, you've gone years doing dialysis, and your story is one that it is of motivation to other patients, who to let them know, hey, I fell down. I felt that was a stage of depression probably that you were also dealing with, and you felt that way being in the in center, which is a lot of patients feel that. Like, if we've heard about from patients in our own patient and family support group, not support group, the PFAC, Patient and Family Advisory Council, of how depression can just creep in, and it is something that at any stage of dialysis they're going to experience that. And so that's exactly what you're conveying here. You felt that, and you felt that was kind of a point in your life where you didn't want that reminder of, I'm not going to be able to do those goals or reach those goals. And transition into home hemodialysis allowed you to continue that. And Robert, like for you, is kind of similar. Being able to do PD allowed you to continue doing the working from home, and continue to continue that circle of friends and socialization that it provided for you. And with COVID, we learned, Zoom and all these other platforms opened up a whole new world. I was even doing Zoom with family and doing game nights and connecting with family and friends via Zoom. So it's something that did definitely open up a lot of doors for everyone. In talking about your care, one of the things we hear often is managing your health and your treatment plan. You guys talked about that, and I do get calls oftentimes from facilities saying, "Oh, I have patients who come in and they tell me what they want for their treatment," and they're they oftentimes kind of label these patients as problematic patients, or a patient who doesn't have good ways of communicating how they want to be a little more involved in their treatment, and it comes across, depending on how it's conveyed, it comes across a little stronger. And I have said to them, have you offered them the option of doing home dialysis? If they want to be so empowered and they want to be able to take care of their own treatment, maybe that is an option for them. Can you share, for you both, how home dialysis gave you that self-empowerment over your treatment?
Well,
Sure.
I was able to do, I'm sorry, I was able to start, do my dialysis, my PD, exchanges when I needed to, when I was working. And then if I was going away, whatever it was. When I started in-center hemo, again, I asked questions I knew, and I was the patient. They came in, you weigh yourself, find out how much over, your dry weight are, and they'd say, okay, Mr. Severa, how much do you think we should pull? Whereas I notice a lot of the patients, as Joey said before, they're older and, even older than me, and they don't ask them those questions. They say, here's your dry weight, here's where you are, here's what we're going to do. They don't even say it, they just do it. I always needed to know and question, not to question them, and I always asked, they always asked me, what do you think we should pull today? That kind of thing. And if they thought it was wrong, a little too much or too less, they'd mention it. And I'd say, all right, let's discuss. And the doctor, and again, my clinic, I was at two different clinics, but close by here, that we had the same conversations, and everybody was very professional about it.
Mhm.
Although I did hear, as you've been in clinic as well, across the room, you see John Doe over there yelling and screaming. And it's unfortunate that we all have to understand that we're all, again, some people are bothered because I'm sick like everybody else. I don't want to be sick like everybody else. Let me just do this on my own. Whereas I was there, knowing that I'm sick. This is what I have to do. I take care of this. I go to this doctor. I go, each time, and I ask questions. And you really need to be knowledgeable. And if a patient is not knowledgeable, the techs and the doctor and the social worker need to, in my opinion, talk to them and say, well, here are your options. I was given the option of, getting on the transplant list and the two different types, PD and hemo immediately. And if not from somebody's mouth, just by looking it up, National Kidney Foundation or, Quality Insights or, whatever clinic company you work with. I mean, it was just, you need to be able to go there and say, here's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And I think also the component you mentioned, Robert, of the open communication with the staff, the being able to convey your wants, but not convey them, but not in a way that's demanding either.
Right.
But in a more of collaborative, like, hey, like they would ask you, how much do you think you want to be removed? And they say, oh, that's a little too ambitious, Mr. Severa. Let's talk about how we can make that work, and educate you as to why maybe this is the better option. But that communication, I think, is very important, and he allowed you, when you were also doing your home PD, you were then more conscious of, all right, this is, I overdid it today, or yesterday I overdid it with what I ate or what I did, and now I have to take care of myself. I have to, better guide my treatment overall.
And interestingly, on PD, you don't really choose how much. You just drain, and when you look, and if it's finished draining, you said, okay, that's what I got today, and you just refill and you go about your business. So, and you just record everything. And then somebody said, well, why do you do that? I said, well, because the goal is more should come out than went in. When you clear the peritoneum of the fluid, let's say whatever you put in, you should have more come out. And, just keep track of those numbers and
Okay.
So, and if you wait an extra 10 minutes while you're draining, you'll know nothing else is coming out. You'll feel fine.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you. Yeah. Joey, how about yourself? How has home hemo allowed you to be more control of your own health and your care?
Basically, when you have home hemo, as I mentioned earlier, you are able to do your treatment based on your schedule, and also it allows you to think and decide. And for those who are thinking about what happens if there is a equipment malfunction, there is that intensive training of in my center at least 6 weeks, where they cover anywhere from treatment to what if something happens, and they prepare you for those types of emergencies step by step. The other is that although there is a training and there is a manual is in print, and also it's available in the iPad. There is a 1-800 technical support that you can call in right away, and they either give you the answer or they walk you through it. So in my experience, those types of fear from, example, equipment malfunction or what if other emergencies happen, they were fully covered during the training, and also there is a resource. Additionally, the center that I'm affiliated with is a large dialysis center, so they have a overnight available on-call nurse other than the technical support. So
Yeah, that's good.
Overall, yeah,
Yeah.
overall, the preparation, the training, and the resource available made me comfortable from the
Right.
start until now to continuing my home dialysis treatment.
And I think that's an important point you just made, the fact that there's somebody there 24 hours a day, no matter what day. You
Mm-hmm.
call, whether it's technical support or 2 o'clock in the morning when you're leaking all over the bed, whatever, you call somebody and they answer the phone and they walk you through it step by step. You know, one of the things I push for a home PD is it's never an emergency, because
Mm-hmm.
there's fluid that, if you have something leaking out, it's just fluid that, it's not like it's, urine or blood, or it's just this fluid that's, you just washes right out. It's never gonna, all you do is clamp it and then you go to the clinic the next day. You can wait, and
Mm-hmm.
because at the beginning I didn't know that. I called the emergency number and like, you're fine. And had to call a couple times over the years, the year and a, just for simple things. And they're very helpful. They're never judgmental, and that's important,
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to dialysis. If you go to the clinic the next day, they tell you, I say, oh, I see you called the number yesterday, because they
Mm-hmm.
know, and the communication is always good between people. They know what's going on, so
I could imagine that
very
first time
helpful.
when you had that incident, Robert, and you were like panicking, and then you're still like, no, it's
Yeah,
fine. Don't worry about it. Like, don't.
I mean, the dog was in the room. Dogs are not supposed to be in the room, but what, she was off to the side, and I yelled. I said, tell my wife, get out, close the door, get the dog. The dog's barking. My son's in the other room. What's going on? It was just, and I think back now, it's just, not that it's silly, but you don't know what to expect. Just
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
first time something happens, nobody said to me, okay, if this happens, here's what you do. If this happened, nobody said that. Nobody said to me, a possible side effect is pericarditis, because it doesn't happen often. But once you just, and I tell the people about the pericarditis because anybody on PD, needs to know possibility, just so all different things can happen.
Yeah, it's being
Mm-hmm.
educated, and it doesn't
Yes,
catch you by surprise. So that way, when it happens, you know what to
exactly.
do and how to act in regards to it. And Joyce, so you mentioned about like myth or fears, some
Mm-hmm.
misconceptions as well that are out there. What are some of the misconceptions or myths that you guys, or fears also, that you've heard patients mention to you, or that you've heard overall, and how would you how did you address those myths and misconceptions? Any that you guys can share?
Yeah, so the number one is basically they said that your home will be occupied by supplies. And we mentioned that earlier, that it can be arranged whether you want it weekly or twice a month or the whole month. And one of the doctor mentioned some patients that had been very creative. They used the box and just like Robert did, they cover with something and it becomes almost like an art in the room,
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah.
The other is the isolation that, as mentioned, Robert, depending on your stage of life, you see the 3 times a week visit in the end center as a social gathering. And I mentioned also that um, at home, I use technology, FaceTime, Zoom calls for some of the courses that I took, phone calls, and also when I'm not on treatment, I allow a lot of friends to visit me. Visit for gathering over a tea or other things, or basically meeting in a coffee shop or other places where I maintain my social life.
Mhm.
But the number one is that when I was in the in center, I have to be present when my chair or my schedule, when my schedule is uh,
Available
available,
already. Yeah.
because that chair is dedicated for me. Now, while doing home dialysis, I maintain more of my social life because I was never absent in social gatherings,
Mhm.
whether it's noontime, evening, Sunday, or whatnot, because I can reschedule my treatment depending on my availability.
Yeah. One thing I want
Um,
to, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to
mhm.
interrupt you before the thought escapes my mind. Robert, you mentioned in your experience how if you spill fluid, it's just fluid. It's something that could be cleaned up.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, Joyce, as you were speaking, one of the fears, the biggest fears that patients have with doing home hemodialysis, since you're, putting a needle in and something can, let's say something can happen, you don't have, not having that nurse present in the room in case something were to happen. I think that's one of the biggest fears that patients share. I don't want to do home dialysis, whether it be PD or home hemo, because I don't have a nurse if anything were to happen, if blood starts spilling all over the place, or something like that were to happen. How would you respond to that, Joyce?
So remember that training incorporates every aspect of dialysis, whether you are peritoneal dialysis or hemodialysis. And they will not send you home. They give you certification that you're able to do A, B, C, D up to Z, including what to do during emergency. So they will not send you home if they feel that you are not able and safe to do the treatment by yourself. The other is that they don't not only just discuss, but you have to return demonstration that they see that you're able to do it. The other is they provide you with supplies and equipment. For example, when my husband and I divorced and I became a solo, I was prescribed with a solo treatment. They also not only prescribe me solo treatment, but they prescribe me what you call a red sense. It's a sensor that's placed at the base of the needle. In the event that I fall asleep and there's a blood leakage, it will alarm.
Okay.
So there are, I call it accessory equipment to make sure that when you're doing your treatment, everything is safe.
Okay.
And then there's that 1-800 number. And there are things that they tell you, in case this happens, this is what you need to do. Now demonstrate to me. In case this happens, where rarely happens, you just do this one. So you will never be sent home if they feel that you are unable to execute the possibilities of intervening in an emergency or should something happen.
Yeah, like
since 2016, I never had anything that requires emergency procedure. I never had any infection, just because the foundational training. And then you go to the clinic once a week and they review everything. So there is a constant review for the skills that you had been taught.
Okay. No, that's great. And that's I think what I wanted to kind of hear from you, some of the technology that is available for, if you do fall asleep and you start, bleeding, or the line comes, something happens to the line, is it automatically going to shut off the machine, or it's going to cut, like clamp the lines? Or is that what you're saying? What was
No. So there is this sensor that you put at the base of the needle. Example, the needle dislodged and it's leaking, but you're asleep. Then the alarm will wake you up.
Okay.
And then you execute what they taught you. Put pressure on the side. However, as I've said, because the training is extensive, by just the way you put your tape and secure the line,
okay,
if you follow what they have taught you, then the line will not be dislodged. Which, in my case, it's been since 2016, and we are now 2024. I never had any of that because I followed what they taught me.
Yeah, and talking about the transition of years, Robert, you did PD a couple of years back, and Joyce, you've been doing home hemo for some time. There have been innovations and improvement in the care for both PD and home hemo. And we continue to see, like, the machines are smaller. That changes, as you mentioned, Robert, that before they used to deliver the fluid and the equipment that you needed once a month, now it's twice a month. So there have been changes in the technology and the treatment plan and everything. What are some of the support services or innovations that you think would be beneficial for making home dialysis a better option for patients?
Well, there was that talk in one of the national calls about the development of artificial kidney. So patients right now with heart failure, some have the left ventricular assist device, which is an artificial pumping heart. Hopefully, in order to promote mobility, especially in this kind of world where a lot of patients still work and have other responsibilities, I would like to see that the development will be faster than other equipments available. There's also that that previous surgery that they use an animal kidney into
Xenotransplant?
yes, and it lasted quite several months. And I'm sure there are studies or investigations going on that will probably hasten compatibilities or more advantageous outcome of patients like that.
Yeah.
If anyone in the government or those deciding bodies look at the amount of money spent in end-stage renal disease, that can be converted into research so that patients like us with chronic kidney disease dependent on dialysis would someday be conserving money instead of spending money. While I was a member of a national organization, I was able to be a panel in the discussion about the post-dialysis fatigue syndrome. There are plans of looking at nutrition or something that can be given prior to the treatment, and or sustaining vitamins or foods or other things in order to avoid that. The other also is I hope that there is a more active discussion on how to prevent infection on patients with chronic kidney disease on dialysis. Our immune system is depressed, and anytime we get some type of virus or bacterial infection, the possibility of death is higher than others. A discussion with supporting data was presented at some point that there is a lot of what a better word, not equity, disenfranchised populations when it comes to care of dialysis, especially for Spanish and African American. I'd like to see in the future that care are equal to everybody.
That there's equal opportunities. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And there is studies conducted, and there have been some new releases coming out from CMS. So yeah, I agree. Robert, any changes or anything that you think improvements to home dialysis that can make it a better experience for patients?
Again, my experience just with PD, I thought, except for the delivery and the amount of material, I talked to people who said, I have a small one-bedroom apartment, I have no room for material.
Yeah.
Now the change is just every 2 weeks or maybe even every 10 days or whatever is a possibility that makes, one little checkbox off my list that I would think would be changed. I think, though, comes down to no matter what we're talking about, education. Now, I've spoken with many patients at lobby visits I've done with you that, their first answer is, well, I can't do that. First of all, transplant, I don't qualify, and that's not true. I mean, I had heart disease, I've had surgery, and I still qualify. Well, I can't, for other reasons, whatever. One gentleman didn't want to do PD. He said he'll never be able to go back to his country, Korea, I think it was. And I explained to him, I said, oh, no, you can go. With this type of, PD, you can have that material with you and travel, And he said, oh, and he came right back. He was walking out the door, turned around and came right back to have this discussion. And that's the important. Have people besides, just there's a few mentors, but you have to have more communication. Those lobby visits I enjoy, and there's times, as you know, you walk in, the guy doesn't even, nope, not interested. We just move on from there. And there's people who said they're not interested, but are listening as I'm having conversations, and then suddenly are listening and asking me questions. And that's, it just takes the invite from a clinic to come and find me or you, and then you'll let me know. And that's really what it is. And the fact that I am retired and I have the time, that's really, this is like my give back, because, I go to that dialysis clinic to visit, and I always bring them food and things. And I try to have conversations, but I get too emotional because they were part of my recovery, my life. And yes, they know it's important work, but they're doing their work. And I'm sitting there, I can't even tell them how much they mean to me,
Yeah.
and they'll never really know. And probably won't see many of these people ever again, but I just think about them all the time, what they
Yeah.
do and how important what they do is. So
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think that's important, and that's one of the components that we're working on with the our Patient and Family Advisory Council, the PFAC, an appreciation campaign, which we can share in the future. But it is that important to acknowledge too, that these are people also working with you to improve your quality of life. I mean, if it's up to us, we can spend a whole day here. You guys have things to do. Enjoy your work, and you make some time to be here with us. But I do want to give you an opportunity before we end this session. You both mentioned education and receiving support, and when we're talking about the considering the home treatment and future support services, one thing that I keep hearing often is the continued support from nurses at home. So if patients also had that accessibility that a nurse can come out after the initial training that they receive in center, if they can continue receiving some of that support at home, it doesn't have to be every single treatment, but in a certain interval of time, established interval of time, that nurse can continue providing at the initial transition to home, provide that support so that the patients feel more comfortable. I've heard some of that in conversation, and I think when we've mentioned that to patients, if that was available, they've actually said, I wish that was something that was available because it will make me feel a little more comfortable in my transition from in-center to home. So that's something that I've heard happen, and it's something that there's legislation somewhere. I think it was California who's kind of trying to put something in place. I'll look it up, but I just wanted to plant that seed that that's something that has come up in different conversations, and it's something that has been identified as a possible need and a best practice that would help promote home dialysis even more. But like I said, we can spend here a whole day just keep talking about the topic, and we've set a foundation for other topics here. You talk about infection control, we talked about transplant, and those are topics that we can come back and talk about in the future. But I want to give you guys an opportunity before we end today's segment that you share something with the listeners in regards to they themselves are navigating their own kidney disease journey. Maybe they're considering home dialysis as a treatment option. What would you say personally to these patients who are on the fence about it or are not haven't considered it yet? And it is something that, I mean, you've shared so much of your journey, you share some of your experience, but any final words of encouragement that you could leave them with?
For me,
Right,
it's only until you experience, then you can tell the outcome. So for those of you who are thinking about possibly doing peritoneal dialysis or home hemodialysis, the methodology is what fits for you. But for me, it made me feel independent, basically in charge of my own health. The benefits I reap typically basically allowed me to maintain a full-time work. The side effects of dialysis are minimal compared to the in-center. So speak with your nephrologist and try to at least connect with patients like me or Robert, and then eventually try it. And only then that you can tell that you hope that you have done or decided a long time ago. A chronic illness cannot be changed. If you're diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, that's why they call it end-stage. But it should not override your life and it should not define you. Look at me. I have a full-time job and doing other things. And until I get a kidney, then I will remain on home treatment. Good luck to you, and I hope you'll find the best therapy for you, just like Robert and I.
Great, thank you. How about you, Robert?
Joyce said it best. Everything she did perfect. I defined myself for a number of years I said, what if somebody asked me who I am? I'm a dialysis patient. I know I don't think about that anymore. I'm not a dialysis. Are you a transplant patient? Yeah, but that's gone too. Now I'm just living my life, because when you first start, you have to focus, but you have your life to live. I was doing my dialysis and I just kept going. I didn't miss much work. I just had surgery. Okay, let's move on and let's keep going. After that, and you have to just continue. And the biggest thing is ask questions. Talk to your nephrologist. Talk to the social worker, the dietitian, the charge nurse, anybody. Ask them the same questions if you have to. Say, I want to talk to somebody. I want to talk. Show me the paperwork to get started. Oh, it takes months. Well, start now, and it will take fewer months than if you start in 5 months. Is the testing? Yeah, it's a little extensive, but you go and do what you have to do. And I'll have to say one last thing. We in New Jersey are very lucky that we live close to, I mean, I could look 20-mile radius, how many dialysis clinics to my house, I would find at least 30, at least. Whereas people throughout the country, they have to travel hours, an hour, half hour, 50 minutes. For transplant, you're talking 6, 8 hours. Sometimes they have to fly. So again, I think I'm lucky in this area, but you just need to ask a lot of questions and put that smile on your face, whether you want to or not, and you'll get answers, and you'll have whatever success you're looking for.
Well, again, like I said, thank you both so much for those words of encouragement and knowledge, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you for spending this afternoon, morning, whenever you're listening to this. We did start in the morning and it's afternoon now, so
Yes.
we have spent a good amount of time here. I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation for joining us today and sharing such valuable information. Your engagement, your feedback is what makes these podcasts epic. And yes, I did use that as a pun. So to all our listeners out there, thank you so much. And thank you, Robert and Joyce, for joining us today. To our listeners out there, if you have a topic that you want to hear more about, if you want us to invite Robert and Joyce and talk a little bit more about other topics that they have experience with, let me know as well. But if you want to be featured in an episode as well as a listener, and you have a story you want to be able to share, I welcome that. Please reach out to me at my email, ycubillo@qualityinsights.org. Thank you all for tuning in this episode of the Epic Podcast. Stay connected for more inspiring stories and enlightening discussions in episodes to come. Thank you all.
Thank you.